The morning sun cast long shadows across the tarmac at Washington Dulles International Airport as Sergeant First Class Michael Rodriguez adjusted his dress uniform one final time. The crisp blue fabric bore the weight of honor and tradition, each ribbon and badge telling a story of service and sacrifice. Today, however, his mission carried a gravity unlike any other assignment he had ever undertaken. Behind him, carefully secured in the cargo hold of the military transport aircraft, lay the flag-draped casket of Private First Class David Chun, a 19-year-old soldier who had made the ultimate sacrifice while serving his country in Afghanistan. David had been killed by an improvised explosive device while on patrol, protecting a convoy delivering medical supplies to a remote village. His death had shaken the entire unit, but none more so than Rodriguez, who had mentored the young soldier since his arrival overseas. Rodriguez had volunteered for this solemn duty without hesitation. As a member of the elite honor guard, he had escorted fallen heroes before, but this mission felt deeply personal. David had reminded him of his younger brother, sharing the same quick smile and unwavering determination to make a difference in the world. The responsibility of ensuring David's safe passage home to his grieving family in California weighed heavily on Rodriguez's shoulders. The flight from Dover Air Force Base had been quiet and respectful. The crew understood the sacred nature of their cargo, maintaining the reverent silence that accompanied such journeys. Rodriguez had spent the 3-hour flight reviewing the detailed itinerary that would guide David's final homecoming. Every step had been meticulously planned, from the transfer to the connecting flight to the eventual arrival in San Francisco, where David's parents would be waiting as the aircraft touched down at Dulles. Rodriguez felt a familiar mix of pride and sorrow. This was always the most challenging part of his duties, the transition from military protocol to civilian airport procedures. While the military treated these moments with the utmost reverence, civilian airports operated under different rules and pressures. Time schedules, security protocols, and bureaucratic procedures often clashed with the dignity these occasions demanded. The plane taxied to a remote area of the airport, away from the busy commercial terminals. This was standard procedure for military transports, providing the privacy and respect that such missions required. Rodriguez gathered his paperwork, double-checking every document that would be needed for the transfer. The death certificate, military identification, transport authorization, and connecting flight information were all neatly organized in his regulation briefcase. As the aircraft came to a complete stop, Rodriguez could see the ground crew approaching with the specialized equipment needed to handle the casket. These civilian workers had been briefed on the proper protocols, and Rodriguez felt confident that this portion of the journey would proceed smoothly. The honor guard had worked with this airport many times before, and the relationship between military and civilian personnel had always been professional and respectful. The cargo door opened, letting in the humid Virginia air. Rodriguez stepped onto the mogul stairs, his polished shoes clicking against the metal steps as he descended to the tarmac. The ground crew leader, a middle-aged man named Thompson, approached with a solemn nod of acknowledgement. Thompson had overseen dozens of these transfers and understood the weight of the moment. Rodriguez watched as the casket was carefully removed from the aircraft, the American flag draped perfectly across its surface, catching the morning breeze. The ground crew moved with practiced precision, their movements slow and deliberate, showing the proper respect for the fallen soldier within. This was how it should be, Rodriguez thought, dignified, respectful, and seamless. The transfer vehicle, a specialized hearse designed for airport operations, waited nearby. The route to the commercial terminal had been cleared, ensuring an uninterrupted journey to the connecting gate. Rodriguez had made this same walk many times before, always maintaining his military bearing while escorting heroes home to their families. Today felt no different as he prepared to accompany David on the next leg of their journey. The casket was secured in the transfer vehicle, and Rodriguez climbed into the passenger seat beside the driver. The short journey across the airport grounds would take them to Terminal C, where the connecting flight to San Francisco was scheduled to depart in 2 hours. This timing provided adequate buffer for any unexpected delays while ensuring the family would not have to wait longer than necessary for their son's return. As the vehicle began moving across the vast airport complex, Rodriguez reflected on the young soldier's life and sacrifice. David had joined the army shortly after graduating high school, driven by a desire to serve his country and protect others. His letters home had been filled with hope and determination, even in the face of danger. Now, Rodriguez carried the responsibility of ensuring that David's final journey home would be conducted with the honor and dignity he deserved. The transfer vehicle pulled up to the cargo entrance of Terminal C, where a team of airline personnel waited to receive the casket. Rodriguez stepped out, immediately noticing the bustling activity around the terminal. Unlike the quiet reverence of the military transport area, this part of the airport hummed with the constant energy of commercial aviation. Passengers rushed past with rolling luggage. Airport announcements echoed through the corridors, and the general chaos of modern travel filled the air. Rodriguez approached the airline supervisor, a stern-faced woman named Patricia Williams, who held a clipboard and wore the expression of someone dealing with mounting pressure. The morning had already brought multiple delays due to weather on the East Coast, and her crew was working overtime to keep flights on schedule. Williams barely looked up as Rodriguez presented his documentation, her attention divided between his paperwork and the radio chatter from her operations team. The honor guard sergeant maintained his professional composure as Williams reviewed the transfer documents. Everything appeared to be in order: the military authorization, the connecting flight manifest, and the special handling instructions were all properly completed and signed. However, Williams frowned as she studied the timeline, calculating the potential impact on her already strained operation. The connecting flight to San Francisco was experiencing its own delays due to air traffic control issues on the West Coast. What had originally been a 2-hour layover was now compressed to just 90 minutes, and Williams knew that any additional delays could result in missed connections and cascading problems throughout the day. The pressure from her supervisors to maintain on-time performance was intense, and every decision carried the weight of potential consequences. As the airline crew began the careful process of transferring the casket from the military vehicle to their own equipment, Williams made a decision that would soon spiral beyond her control. She approached Rodriguez with a determined expression, her voice taking on an authoritative tone that immediately set him on edge. The conversation that followed would later be described by witnesses as tense and increasingly confrontational. Williams informed Rodriguez that due to operational constraints and security protocols, the casket would need to be processed through the standard cargo screening procedures before being loaded onto the connecting flight. This was not standard protocol for military remains, which typically received expedited handling and ceremonial respect. Rodriguez politely but firmly explained that the casket had already been properly screened and processed according to military procedures, and that additional screening was unnecessary and inappropriate. The airline supervisor, however, was unwilling to budge. She cited company policy and federal aviation regulations, insisting that all cargo, regardless of its nature, must comply with their security requirements. What she failed to understand, or perhaps chose to ignore, was that military remains were not typical cargo. They represented the ultimate sacrifice made by service members, and their handling required special consideration and respect. Rodriguez felt his patience beginning to wear thin as Williams continued to insist on following standard procedures. He explained the sacred nature of his mission and the importance of maintaining the dignity that the fallen soldier deserved. The honor guard had protocols and traditions that had been developed over decades to ensure that heroes received proper treatment during their final journey home. These were not mere bureaucratic requirements, but solemn obligations to the deceased and their families. The situation escalated when Williams called for airport security to resolve the dispute. 2 uniformed security officers approached, their presence immediately drawing the attention of nearby passengers and airport personnel. Rodriguez found himself in an impossible position. His duty required him to protect the dignity of the fallen soldier, but he also needed to navigate the increasingly complex web of civilian authority and Airport regulations. The security officers, unsure of the proper protocol for handling military remains, sided with the airline supervisor. They informed Rodriguez that he would need to comply with all airport procedures or risk having the casket removed from the flight entirely. This threat struck at the heart of Rodriguez's mission and his commitment to ensuring David's timely return to his family. Word of the confrontation began to spread through the terminal as passengers and airport workers stopped to observe the unusual scene. A uniformed military honor guard, arguing with airline and security personnel, was not something most people encountered during their travels. Some passengers began recording the interaction on their smartphones, not fully understanding the significance of what they were witnessing, but sensing that something important was happening. Rodriguez made one final attempt to resolve the situation diplomatically. He contacted his commanding officer by phone, hoping that military authority could intervene and clarify the proper procedures. However, the wheels of bureaucracy moved slowly, and Williams was unwilling to wait for military approval. She had a schedule to maintain and superiors who expected results, not excuses. The standoff continued as more security personnel arrived at the scene. What had begun as a simple disagreement over procedures had evolved into a complex jurisdictional dispute involving military protocol, airline policy, and airport security regulations. Rodriguez stood firm in his position, knowing that his primary obligation was to the fallen soldier and the grieving family waiting in California. The confrontation was about to reach a critical turning point that would capture the attention of the entire nation. Sarah Martinez, a college student traveling home to visit her family, was waiting near Gate C-12 when she noticed the commotion unfolding at the cargo area. Unlike most passengers who hurried past with their own travel concerns, Sarah felt compelled to understand what was happening. She had grown up in a military family. Her father was a retired Marine, and something about the scene triggered her protective instincts for service members. As Sarah moved closer, she could clearly hear the heated exchange between the honor guard sergeant and the airport officials. The words "fallen soldier" and "dignity" caught her attention immediately. She realized she was witnessing something that went far beyond a simple bureaucratic dispute. This was about honoring someone who had died serving their country, and that person was being treated like ordinary cargo. Hesitation. Sarah pulled out her smartphone and began recording. Her hands trembled slightly as she captured the scene, knowing instinctively that this moment needed to be preserved and shared. The honor guard sergeant stood tall and unwavering, his military bearing evident even as he faced increasing pressure from multiple airport officials. His voice remained calm and professional, but Sarah could hear the underlying emotion as he repeatedly emphasized the sacred nature of his mission. The video captured Williams as she gestured dismissively toward the flag-draped casket, treating it as nothing more than an inconvenient delay in her operational schedule. Security officers stood with arms crossed, their body language suggesting they viewed the honor guard as an obstacle rather than a protector of military tradition. The contrast between the sergeant's dignified bearing and the official's bureaucratic inflexibility was stark and disturbing. Sarah's 2-minute recording captured the essence of the confrontation perfectly. The audio was clear, the visuals were unshakable, and the emotional impact was immediate and powerful. As she finished recording, Sarah felt a surge of anger at what she had witnessed. This was not how America should treat its fallen heroes or the service members dedicated to honoring them. Other passengers had also begun recording, but Sarah's video was the most comprehensive and emotionally compelling. She immediately opened her social media apps and began uploading the footage with a caption that would soon resonate across the internet. Airport officials are blocking an honor guard from escorting a fallen soldier home. This is absolutely heartbreaking and wrong. Share this so the world can see how our heroes are being treated. Within minutes of posting, Sarah's video began attracting views and comments. Her modest social media following shared the content immediately, and the engagement grew exponentially. The emotional power of the footage struck a nerve with viewers who were outraged by the treatment of both the fallen soldier and his honor guard escort. Comments poured in expressing shock, anger, and demands for accountability. The video's reach expanded beyond Sarah's network as military families, veterans organizations, and patriotic Americans shared it across multiple platforms. Each share was accompanied by increasingly passionate commentary about the disrespectful treatment of military personnel and the bureaucratic callousness displayed by airport officials. The hashtags #HonorOurFallen and #RespectTheGuard began trending as the story gained momentum. News outlets monitoring social media trends quickly picked up the story. Local television stations in Washington, San Francisco, and other major markets began reaching out to their airport contacts for comment. The video had captured something that resonated deeply with American values: respect for military service and the proper treatment of fallen heroes. This was exactly the type of story that could galvanize public opinion and demand immediate action. Meanwhile, back at the airport, Rodriguez remained focused on his mission despite the growing chaos around him. He was unaware that his confrontation was being broadcast to millions of people online, but he could sense that something had changed in the atmosphere. More passengers had gathered around the cargo area, and many were openly expressing support for his position. Some veterans in the crowd stepped forward to offer their assistance, their own military experience giving them insight into the significance of the moment. Williams and the security team found themselves increasingly uncomfortable as the crowd grew larger and more vocal. What had seemed like a straightforward enforcement of airport policy was becoming a public relations nightmare. The passengers weren't just observing anymore, they were actively challenging the officials' decision and demanding that the honor guard be allowed to complete his mission without further interference. The power of social media was becoming evident as the video continued to spread at viral speed. Sarah watched in amazement as her view count climbed into the hundreds of thousands, then millions. Major news personalities and political figures began sharing the video with their own commentary, amplifying its reach even further. The story was transcending social media and entering mainstream consciousness with unprecedented speed. Airport executives monitoring the situation began receiving urgent calls from their public relations teams. The video was generating overwhelmingly negative coverage for the airport and airline, with viewers calling for boycotts and demanding immediate policy changes. What had started as a routine operational decision was rapidly becoming a crisis that threatened to damage reputations and impact business operations. Rodriguez felt the weight of public attention even though he didn't fully understand its scope. His primary concern remained unchanged, ensuring that Private First Class David Chun received the respectful treatment he deserved during his final journey home. However, the growing support from fellow Americans gave him strength to continue standing firm against the bureaucratic obstacles that threatened to compromise his sacred mission. Within 3 hours of Sarah's initial post, major news networks had picked up the story and were running it as breaking news. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and other outlets interrupted their regular programming to show the viral video and provide commentary on the shocking treatment of the honor guard. The story had all the elements that drove modern media cycles: visual drama, clear heroes and villains, and an emotional hook that resonated with viewers across political divides. Television news anchors struggled to maintain their professional composure as they described the scene unfolding at Dulles Airport. The contrast between the honor guard's dignity and the officials' bureaucratic inflexibility provided a stark visual narrative that required little explanation. Viewers could see for themselves what was happening, and their emotional response was immediate and visceral. Military analysts and veterans advocates appeared on news programs to provide context about honor guard traditions and the sacred nature of escort missions. Colonel James Patterson, a retired Army officer and frequent media commentator, appeared on multiple networks throughout the day. His voice cracked with emotion as he explained the significance of the honor guard's role and the deep disrespect being shown to a fallen hero. Social media platforms experienced unprecedented engagement around the story, Twitter trending topics included not just hashtag honor our fallen and hashtag respect the guard, but also hashtag dullest shame and hashtag never forget. Facebook posts sharing the video received hundreds of thousands of reactions and comments. Instagram stories and TikTok videos analyzing the incident proliferated across younger demographics, ensuring the story reached every age, group, and political affiliation. Political figures from both parties quickly issued statements condemning the treatment of the honor guard and demanding immediate action. Senator Catherine Walsh, whose own son had been killed in Iraq, called for congressional hearings into airport policies regarding military remains. Representative Mike Thompson, a Marine veteran, demanded the immediate resignation of all officials involved in the incident. The bipartisan nature of the outrage amplified the story's impact and ensured continued media attention. Celebrity endorsements added additional fuel to the growing firestorm. Country music stars, Hollywood actors with military connections, and sports figures with patriotic fan bases shared the video with their massive followings. Each celebrity endorsement brought millions of new viewers to the story and increased pressure on airport officials to resolve the situation immediately. The economic impact began manifesting quickly as boycott campaigns gained traction. Travelers canceled flights with the airline involved, and corporate customers threatened to suspend their business relationships. The airline's stock price dropped significantly in after-hours trading as investors anticipated long-term damage to the company's reputation. Social media campaigns encouraging people to choose alternative airlines and airports spread rapidly across platforms. International media outlets picked up the story, framing it as indicative of broader American social issues. British, Canadian, Australian, and other allied nations' news services ran segments about the incident, often expressing bewilderment at how military personnel could be treated so poorly in a country that claimed to honor its service members. The international coverage added another layer of embarrassment for American officials watching the story unfold. Airport executives found themselves in crisis management mode as their phones rang constantly with media requests and angry complaints. The public relations team worked frantically to draft statements that could somehow explain or justify the actions of their personnel, but every attempt seemed to make the situation worse. How could they defend treating a fallen soldier's casket like ordinary cargo? Airlines industry representatives attempted damage control by emphasizing security protocols and regulatory compliance, but their legalistic explanations fell flat against the emotional power of the viral video. The public wasn't interested in technical justifications when they could see with their own eyes that something fundamentally wrong was happening. To someone who had died serving their country, the story dominated radio talk shows throughout the day, with hosts across the political spectrum expressing outrage at the incident. Conservative commentators framed it as disrespect for military values and American traditions. Liberal hosts focused on bureaucratic callousness and the need for institutional reform. Despite their different political perspectives, virtually all media voices united in condemning the treatment of the honor guard. Rodriguez remained largely unaware of the massive media attention his situation was generating, but he could sense that something significant was happening around him. Airport staff members kept glancing at their phones with concerned expressions. Security personnel appeared increasingly uncomfortable with their position. The crowd of supportive passengers continued growing, and many approached him directly to offer encouragement and assistance. Local Washington, D.C. news crews arrived at the airport and began broadcasting live from the scene. Their presence elevated the story from social media phenomenon to real-time news event, providing continuous coverage that kept the incident in the public eye. Live television coverage meant that any resolution would be witnessed by millions of viewers, increasing pressure on officials to find a face-saving solution. The Department of Defense issued a carefully worded statement expressing concern about the incident while avoiding direct criticism of civilian authorities. Military leadership understood the delicate balance between supporting their personnel and maintaining relationships with civilian partners. But the overwhelming public support for Rodriguez made their position increasingly untenable. As evening approached, it became clear that this was no longer just a local airport dispute. The viral video had transformed into a national conversation about respect, dignity, and the proper treatment of military personnel. The officials who had initially seemed confident in their authority now faced a public relations disaster that threatened careers and institutions. The power of social media had turned a routine confrontation into a defining moment that would be remembered long after the immediate crisis was resolved. By evening, the Dulles Airport incident had become the most discussed story in America. Television news broadcasts led with the confrontation. Radio stations devoted entire segments to listener reactions. And social media platforms struggled to handle the unprecedented volume of engagement surrounding the viral video. The story had transcended typical news cycles and become a cultural flashpoint that demanded immediate resolution. Veterans organizations across the country mobilized their memberships in response to the viral video. The American Legion, Veterans of Foreign Wars, and Disabled American Veterans issued joint statements condemning the treatment of the honor guard and calling for immediate policy changes. Local VFW posts organized demonstrations at airports nationwide, ensuring the story remained visible and relevant beyond the initial incident at Dulles. Phone lines at the airport, airline headquarters, and congressional offices were overwhelmed with angry callers demanding accountability. Customer service representatives struggled to handle the volume of complaints, while many callers specifically demanded that Williams and the security officers involved be immediately terminated. The public anger was palpable and sustained, showing no signs of diminishing as the story continued to spread. Corporate sponsors began distancing themselves from the airline as the backlash intensified. A major credit card company suspended its partnership negotiations, citing concerns about brand association with the incident. Hotel chains that had joint marketing agreements quietly began reviewing their contracts. The financial implications of the public relations disaster were becoming clear, and business leaders understood that swift action was necessary to minimize damage. Religious leaders and community organizations added their voices to the growing chorus of condemnation. Ministers, priests, rabbis, and other faith leaders spoke from their pulpits about the importance of honoring those who sacrifice for others. The moral dimension of the story resonated deeply with religious communities who saw the treatment of the fallen soldier as a fundamental failure of human decency and respect. Student groups at colleges and universities organized solidarity events supporting the honor guard and military families. Campus veterans organizations led discussions about military service and the proper treatment of fallen heroes. Even at institutions not typically associated with strong military support, students expressed outrage at the bureaucratic callousness displayed in the viral video. The story gained international attention as allied nations. Media outlets questioned American commitment to honoring military service. British newspapers ran editorials comparing the incident to their own military traditions, highlighting the contrast between stated values and actual treatment of service members. Canadian and Australian news services interviewed their own military officials about proper protocols for handling fallen soldiers. Late-night television hosts devoted opening monologues to the incident, using humor to highlight the absurdity of the bureaucratic response while maintaining respect for the fallen soldier and his honor guard escort. The comedic treatment helped reach audiences that might not normally engage with military or political news, further expanding the story's reach and impact. Airport executives found themselves in an impossible position as the pressure continued mounting. Their initial attempts to justify the actions of their personnel had backfired spectacularly, generating even more negative coverage and public anger. Legal advisors warned that admitting wrongdoing could expose the organization to liability, while public relations experts insisted that only a complete reversal of position could salvage the situation. Williams, the airline supervisor who had initially confronted Rodriguez, was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Security personnel involved in the incident were reassigned to non-public duties. However, these personnel changes did little to satisfy public anger, as critics argued that systemic policy changes were needed. Rather than simply scapegoating individual employees, the incident sparked broader conversations about the militarization of civilian spaces and the balance between security protocols and common sense. Airport security experts debated whether existing procedures were adequate for handling military remains and ceremonial escorts. The discussion revealed significant gaps in training and policy guidance for dealing with honor guard missions. Family members of other fallen soldiers began sharing their own experiences with airport personnel, revealing that the Dulles incident was not isolated but part of a broader pattern of insensitive treatment. These additional testimonials added depth to the story and suggested that systematic reforms were needed across the aviation industry rather than addressing just one incident. Rodriguez continued his vigil beside David's casket, maintaining his professional composure despite the chaos surrounding him. Fellow veterans who had traveled to the airport offered to stand with him in solidarity, creating a powerful visual reminder of military brotherhood and mutual support. The image of multiple service members protecting their fallen comrade resonated deeply with viewers and added emotional weight to the story. Congressional representatives announced plans for immediate hearings on airport policies regarding military remains. Committee staff began drafting legislation that would establish clear protocols for honor guard missions and ensure that fallen soldiers received appropriate treatment during their final journeys home. The political momentum behind reform efforts was building rapidly as lawmakers responded to overwhelming constituent pressure. The Department of Transportation faced mounting pressure to intervene directly in the situation. Secretary Maria Rodriguez issued a statement promising a thorough investigation and potential policy changes, but critics argued that immediate action was needed rather than bureaucratic promises. The federal response was being closely scrutinized as the public demanded accountability from all levels of government. As night fell, vigils were organized at airports across the country where veterans, military families, and patriotic Americans gathered to honor fallen soldiers and support honor guard traditions. These spontaneous demonstrations kept the story visible and maintained pressure for resolution. The grassroots nature of the response demonstrated the deep emotional connection Americans felt to military service and proper treatment of fallen heroes. At 8:47 p.m. Eastern Time, nearly 12 hours after the confrontation began, airport executives arrived at Terminal C to personally intervene in the situation. Regional Director Thomas Mitchell, accompanied by senior security officials and airline management, approached Rodriguez with a formal apology and immediate authorization to proceed with the honor guard mission without further interference. The sudden reversal came after emergency board meetings and urgent consultations with legal teams, public relations experts, and government officials. The overwhelming public backlash had made clear that continued resistance would result in catastrophic damage to the organizations involved. Mitchell's arrival marked the beginning of what officials hoped would be damage control and reputation recovery efforts. Rodriguez accepted the apology with characteristic military professionalism, though his relief was evident to the crowd of supporters who had maintained their vigil throughout the day. The honor guard sergeant had never wavered in his commitment to his mission, and his steadfast dedication had inspired millions of Americans who watched the story unfold through social media and news coverage. The casket transfer proceeded with the dignity and respect that should have been afforded from the beginning. Airport personnel moved with ceremonial precision, their earlier bureaucratic attitudes replaced by solemn reverence for the fallen soldier. The contrast between this respectful handling and the morning's confrontation was stark and widely noted by observers and media coverage. Sarah Martinez, the college student whose viral video had sparked the national outrage, watched the resolution from nearby Gate C-12. She continued documenting the scene, this time capturing the proper treatment of the honor guard and fallen soldier. Her follow-up posts showed the dramatic change in atmosphere and behavior, providing visual evidence that public pressure could force institutional accountability. News networks provided live coverage of the casket being loaded onto the connecting flight to San Francisco. The ceremonial precision of the honor guard escort, combined with the respectful handling by now contrite airport personnel, created powerful television moments that demonstrated how the situation should have been handled from the beginning. The coverage served as both vindication for public outrage and education about proper military protocol. Statements poured forth from airport management, airline executives, and government officials attempting to address the crisis and prevent future incidents. Airport Director Jennifer Walsh announced immediate policy changes ensuring that military remains and honor guard escorts would receive expedited processing and ceremonial respect. The airline issued its own policy revisions and committed to comprehensive sensitivity training for all personnel. The Department of Defense released a detailed statement praising Rodriguez's professionalism and dedication, while calling for systematic changes to prevent similar incidents. Military leadership emphasized the sacred nature of honor guard missions and the importance of civilian cooperation in honoring fallen service members. The statement struck a balance between supporting military personnel and maintaining diplomatic relationships with civilian authorities. Congressional representatives who had called for hearings announced that proceedings would continue despite the immediate resolution. Senator Walsh indicated that legislative action was still necessary to prevent future incidents and ensure consistent treatment of military remains across all transportation systems. The political momentum behind reform efforts remained strong even after the immediate crisis was resolved. The viral video's creator, Sarah Martinez, found herself thrust into an unexpected spotlight as news outlets sought interviews about her role in exposing the incident. She remained humble about her contribution, emphasizing that any American should have done the same thing when witnessing disrespectful treatment of military personnel. Her story became part of the larger narrative about citizen journalism and social media. Accountability. Airlines. Industry representatives began working with military officials to develop standardized protocols for handling honor guard missions and military remains. The collaboration aimed to prevent future confrontations by establishing clear guidelines that respected both security requirements and military traditions. Industry leaders recognized that proactive cooperation was preferable to reactive crisis management. Veterans organizations praised the resolution while maintaining pressure for long-term institutional changes. American Legion National Commander Robert Stevens emphasized that the incident had revealed systemic problems requiring comprehensive solutions. The organizations vowed to monitor implementation of promised policy changes and hold officials accountable for maintaining respectful treatment of military personnel. Flight 2847 to San Francisco departed Dulles Airport at 9:23 p.m., carrying Rodriguez and David's casket toward the final leg of their journey. The delay had extended what should have been a routine connection, but the honor guard's mission continued with renewed purpose and public support. Rodriguez settled into his seat, finally able to focus on preparing for the emotional reunion with David's family. The aircraft cabin maintained the respectful silence appropriate for such missions, with passengers and crew demonstrating the reverence that had been lacking earlier in the day. Flight attendants ensured that Rodriguez had everything needed for the remainder of his journey, their service reflecting the airline's newfound appreciation for military protocols and traditions. As the plane climbed toward cruising altitude, Rodriguez reflected on the unexpected events that had transformed a routine escort mission into a national moment of reckoning. He had never sought publicity or recognition, but his unwavering commitment to honoring a fallen soldier had inspired millions of Americans and forced important conversations about respect, dignity, and institutional accountability. The incident's resolution demonstrated the power of social media to drive rapid change when combined with genuine moral outrage and widespread public support. What had begun as a local confrontation between military and civilian Authorities had evolved into a national conversation about values, traditions, and the proper treatment of those who serve their country with ultimate sacrifice. Flight 2847 touched down at San Francisco International Airport at 11:42 p.m. Pacific Time, concluding a journey that had captured the nation's attention and sparked meaningful conversations about military honor and civilian responsibility. Rodriguez gathered his belongings and prepared for the final phase of his mission, delivering Private First Class David Chun to his grieving family with the dignity and respect he had fought to preserve throughout the day. The San Francisco airport had been transformed by the day's events, with hundreds of veterans, military families, and patriotic Americans gathering to witness David's homecoming. The crowd maintained respectful silence as the honor guard escort proceeded through the terminal, their presence serving as a powerful reminder of the day's significance and the importance of treating fallen heroes with appropriate reverence. David's parents, Maria and Robert Chun, waited in a private area near the arrival gate, their faces reflecting the complex emotions of grief, pride, and gratitude. They had followed the day's events through news coverage and social media, understanding that their son's final journey had become something larger than a personal loss. The public support for their son's honor guard had provided comfort during one of the darkest moments of their lives. Rodriguez approached the Chun family with the same professional bearing that had defined his conduct throughout the ordeal. He presented them with David's personal effects and delivered the official condolences from his commanding officers and fellow soldiers. The private ceremony was conducted with the solemnity and respect that military tradition demanded, providing closure to a day that had tested everyone involved. The media coverage of the reunion focused on the dignity and honor that had finally been restored to the process. News outlets contrasted the respectful treatment at San Francisco with the earlier confrontation at Dulles, using the comparison to illustrate the importance of proper protocols and sensitivity training for civilian personnel handling military remains. In the days following the incident, comprehensive policy changes were implemented across the aviation industry. The Federal Aviation Administration issued updated guidelines for handling military remains and honor guard escorts, establishing clear protocols that balance security requirements with ceremonial respect. Airlines developed specialized training programs ensuring that personnel understood the sacred nature of such missions. Williams, the airline supervisor whose actions had sparked the crisis, was terminated from her position following an internal investigation. The security officers involved received additional training and counseling about appropriate interaction with military personnel. While some critics argued that the individual consequences were insufficient, the institutional changes addressed systemic problems that had enabled the confrontation. Congressional hearings proceeded as promised, with lawmakers from both parties questioning aviation officials about policies and procedures affecting military families. The testimony revealed gaps in training, communication, and oversight that had contributed to the Dulles incident. Legislation was drafted requiring standardized protocols and regular sensitivity training for all personnel involved in handling military remains. Sarah Martinez found herself invited to testify before Congress about the role of citizen journalism in exposing institutional failures. Her viral video had demonstrated the power of social media to drive accountability and force rapid change when combined with genuine moral outrage. Her experience became a case study in digital activism and the importance of documenting injustice. Veterans organizations used the incident to launch broader advocacy campaigns focused on military family support and proper treatment of service members. The American Legion established a monitoring program to ensure that promised policy changes were actually implemented and maintained over time. The sustained attention helped prevent the issue from fading. Once immediate media attention subsided, military leadership conducted their own review of honor guard procedures and civilian coordination protocols. While they praised Rodriguez's professionalism and dedication, they also identified opportunities to improve communication with civilian authorities and prevent future confrontations. The review resulted in enhanced training and clearer guidance. For honor guard personnel operating in civilian environments, the incident's impact extended beyond immediate policy changes to influence broader cultural conversations about respect for military service and the treatment of fallen heroes. Educational institutions incorporated the story into curricula about civic responsibility, digital citizenship, and the importance of standing up for principles even when facing institutional pressure. Rodriguez returned to his duties with the honor guard, continuing to escort fallen soldiers home to their families with the same dedication and professionalism he had demonstrated during the crisis. He received numerous commendations for his conduct during the incident, though he remained humble about his role and focused on the larger mission of honoring military sacrifice. The viral video continued to circulate on social media platforms, serving as a permanent reminder of the importance of treating military personnel and fallen heroes with appropriate respect. Educational organizations used the footage in training programs, while veterans groups shared it during awareness campaigns about military, family support, and proper protocols. Corporate responses to the incident established new standards for crisis management in the social media age. Business schools added the case to their curricula as an example of how quickly institutional failures could escalate into national controversies when captured and shared through digital platforms. The speed and scope of the public reaction demonstrated the need for proactive policies and genuine cultural sensitivity. 1 year later, airports across the country observed the anniversary of the incident with ceremonies honoring fallen soldiers and recognizing the importance of proper military protocols. The day had become an unofficial reminder of civilian obligations to military families and the power of individual action to drive institutional change. The lasting legacy of the Dulles Airport confrontation extended far beyond the immediate resolution of one honor guard mission. It had sparked meaningful conversations about respect, dignity, and institutional accountability while demonstrating that ordinary Americans still care deeply about honoring military service and sacrifice. The incident proved that viral moments could translate into lasting change when backed by genuine moral conviction and sustained public pressure. David Chun's final journey home had become a catalyst for positive change that honored his memory and improved treatment for countless other military families. His sacrifice, combined with Rodriguez's unwavering dedication and Sarah Martinez's citizen journalism, had created a powerful example of how individual actions could influence institutional behavior and cultural values in the digital age.